The big question in a liquid society is, how do we connect these conversations to each other? How do we become also offline? How can we use all this new material, all these new ways of making connections, also to make a better democracy and a better discussion within our societies? And we see in European societies, this is an example from Belgium, also initiated in the Netherlands, a G1000, just 1,000 citizens with each other in a physical place, having discussions about their local environment and how to improve it. And so we are creating new structures, new networks, to make sure that not only we have a representative democracy, but also a deliberative democracy, discussing with each other, finding our voices, connecting these voices. And I think this is one of the challenges that we're facing in the coming years, and where you also have, I think, a very important role. For me, it's time to sum up. Because we have been looking into some of the strategies. More strategies can be downloaded. In the end, you will see the website about how do we respond, what kind of strategies do we develop based on a liquid society. So how do we deal with abundance, and what are the opportunities of abundance? Well, maybe more discussions, more people involved in the themes and the things they find important. Or when it comes to this playfulness and the need for playfulness to actually understand how diversity works and how diversity can work for each other, or when it creates new networks. Because I think this is the biggest challenge and something we can really transform into. We come from quite of an ego-oriented society, I think, where the Industrial Revolution ended up in. And a new possibility of a liquid society is, how do we foster these connections? We can now make connections all over the world, but how can we make them meaningful and understandable in the future? And I think also when it comes to language, when it comes to understanding each other, this is really crucial. Here he is, from ego to eco. And that's how I want to end up with. Because do we really understand each other, and do we really listen to each other? I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we're now facing in this abundance of communication channels, this abundance way of talking to each other. Do we really still listening to each other? Are we still understanding what people are saying to each other? And this is how I want to conclude, because sometimes I think we're not really listening anymore. We're not taking the opportunity of all these possibilities we now have. So we have to reconnect and really make sure that the language we're using is really about understanding what the other says, and therefore making sure that we can create a better society in the coming years ahead. And I think Socrates, or the Socratic conversations, are a great way to introduce actually each other understanding. Because a couple of years ago, I did such a Socratic conversation. And one of the rules of the Socratic conversation, in my case, was that before I could take the floor in the panel I was part of, I had to repeat the last sentence of the person before me. That's one of the rules of a Socratic conversation. And the effect was stunning. I found out that when I'm on a panel, I'm not that much into listening to the others. I'm thinking about my next point to make. It has to be witty, and it has to be understandable. So we're not great listeners, generally. You are, of course, but are we as societies great listeners? I think our societies have to relearn listening. And I think some of these Socratic ways, like a Socratic rule, just finish the last sentence of the person before you can take the floor. It's amazing what happens to your own point you make. Because you've been so intensely listening to the other person before you, because otherwise you won't get the floor if you don't get the last sentence right. And well, you never know when somebody ends his sentence, right, or her sentence. You never know. So you have to listen. He or she ends the sentence, you repeat it, and then comes your point. But it's not your point. You're building up the sentence from what the other persons have been said, because you were so intently in the other person's mind of thinking. And I think these ways of building up each other trust, building up each other conversations, is something we hopefully can really foster in the liquid society. And with that, I would like to end. Good luck. Thanks.